Welcome to These Days Special Edition. I'm Gloria Penner. Devout Catholics are concerned about the avalanche of child sex abuse allegations raining down on priests. Many questioned last month's Vatican decision that priests would be defrocked only if they had become notorious in their sexual abuse of minors. And this week, the Boston Archdiocese backed out of a multi-million-dollar settlement with 86 alleged victims of a predatory priest. What kind of impact has this crisis had on local parishes, and how are San Diego's priests addressing the situation? My guests are Father Michael Radicek, pastor of Santa Sophia Catholic Church in Spring Valley, and Rosemary Johnston, a Catholic lay leader who is also director of the San Diego Ecumenical Council. I welcome you both, and let's start out right with you, Father. How did your parishioners react to the scandal, and what is their mood now in your congregation?
Okay. I think as the first revelations came out, there was a lot of shock, dismay, there was anger, confusion. But as we began to talk about things in the parish and among people, there's a willingness to better understand the situation, and they're looking for more answers to resolve the problems.
Well, naturally, they'd be looking for more answers, but what is it that troubles them the most about the situation?
I think what we've experienced in recent months is the fact that there were so many allegations raised. There was such an avalanche of allegations across the country of old situations that were seemingly resolved. And so it's a lot for people to kind of take in at one time. And if there was maybe more openness over the years regarding these allegations and people had a little bit more awareness of these situations, it wouldn't be such a shock right now.
So there are some concerns, some suspicions. Is that what we're saying about the way the old situations, the old sexual abuse cases were handled?
Correctly. We have 195 dioceses across the country, and I think most dioceses have handled the situations very well. There have been a few, obviously, that we're dealing with now that seems to be where mistakes have been made. There's been too much secrecy, and again, all of a sudden now that is the focus.
And what about you, Rosemary Johnson? What has been your reaction to what's happened and to the way the church hierarchy has handled the situation?
Well, I think there's as much anger about the cover-up as there is about the nature of the allegations. And I think that's been a major issue that I've seen among Catholic lay people, at least.
So you mean the allegations themselves were not of particular concern?
They are a major of concern, absolutely. The violation of trust at all levels. But the cover-up has been, I think, really raised the anger among lay people.
Well, what does this allude to in terms of the cover-up? What does that mean to you? What is your issue with the cover-up?
Well, I think it cites the need for systemic change. That initially, when these allegations first surfaced several years ago, it was like aberrant behavior, a few people, a few bad apples. But now with this avalanche of new allegations and incidents and the pattern of secrecy, that has really created a great gulf in credibility. It's not a crisis of faith, though, because I think a lot depends on where you place your faith. If you place your faith in an individual bishop or an individual priest, then you're going to be in big trouble. But if you place your faith in Jesus Christ and try to live out the gospel in your everyday life and be faithful to the church's tradition, then you're going to be shocked at these allegations. But it shouldn't shake your basic faith.
Is that what you're finding, that basic faith is not shaken, that
Correctly.
It's more shaken faith in individual priests and in the hierarchy?
Yes. I think, again, the question, as Rosemary so well stated, I think the question is a sense of secrecy and not openness. I find a lot of my parishioners saying, like, why didn't we hear about these things before? And that as I begin having discussions with parishioners and meetings in the parish, when I remind them that priests are cut from the same cloth as the laity, that we're human beings like everybody else, and that our problems are just as human as anybody else's problems, family problems, they begin to realize that. Then the question is, well, why didn't we more honestly and openly deal with this?
Is that how priests are really perceived, as cut from the same cloth as the laity?
Well, I think since Vatican II, there's been a greater awareness of the potential for holiness in married life and and in the lay vocation, whether as a married person or a single person. But in certain cultures, I think there's still a tendency to raise the priest to a level of a demigod. And I remember one day...
Excuse me, can you accept that? Can you
Yes.
accept being raised to the level of a demigod?
I prefer not, but that does happen. That's true. Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
Go ahead.
okay.
I remember one time I had my daughter at a supermarket, and she saw one of our assistant pastors from our church grocery shopping, and she was kind of shocked. And I said, well, you know, they have to eat too. You know, she said, well, I didn't know they went grocery shopping.
Well, you raise a really interesting point, and that is, you know, the real world versus the world of the priests. And one wonders if perhaps this problem became exaggerated or was allowed to continue because, to a certain extent, priests don't live in the real world, or they're not perceived as living in the real world.
I think that they're more not perceived living in the real world, and I think, again, since Vatican II, there has been much more that happens in the way of interaction between clergy and laity, and that needs to continue to happen, that the faithful see their priests indeed as human beings who are working with them, ministering with them, trying to grow in holiness together.
So what has been the role of the laity in this crisis?
Well, we haven't had much of a role, and I think that's a large part of the problem. One of the changes that needs to occur is that there be far more lay representation on diocesan boards and on national bishop conference boards, et cetera, and even at the Vatican. Certainly women have been excluded, and by and large lay people are excluded from the decision-making bodies in the Catholic Church. We serve at best in an advisory capacity.
So how could that change things? How do you see it changing things if the laity were more involved? Or don't you agree with Rosemary that the laity should be more involved?
Oh, I definitely agree with Rosemary. And again, the impetus from Vatican II and many of the documents in recent years, again, encourage laity involvement, and we need to be taking that seriously. And again, clergy must be really calling forth responsible ministry on the part of the laity, and the laity must be willing also to respond. In the busyness of their lives, they need to respond. For example, at our parish, I have to work very hard to find members who are willing to serve on our pastoral council, our finance council. Yet these are just very important functions. I need the laity input so that we can work together. So it's a two-way street of calling forth the laity, and then the laity having a willingness to serve.
Just to clarify and maybe be a little more specific, if you, Rosemary, were sitting on a board of review at this point, looking over the situation, the cases of pedophilia and the cases of cover-ups, all of the stuff that we've been hearing about, what would you contribute to the discussion that isn't part of the discussion now?
Well, I think as a married person and as a parent, I would have a valuable contribution to make in terms of what a poor decision it would be to transfer someone who had already demonstrated that they did not have appropriate boundaries with children to another parish. And part of it has to do with a kind of desperation that I see on the part of our bishops as vocations to the priesthood continue to decline. We're not going to have any ordinations in our diocese for 2 years now.
So are you saying it's better to keep the thinking is it's better to keep a priest who is a pedophile than have no priest at all?
Well, I think that may have been a factor in the thinking, and also this great concern about preventing scandal. I think that was a major factor, that we don't want any scandal.
Do you think that's part of it? The first part of what Rosemary was saying, that because of the diminution of the number of priests, that there was a real attempt to keep a priest, even a priest who was behaving in this way?
It could be, again, because of the shortage of priests, or the lesser number of priests that we've had in previous years. There could be a greater effort to keep priests and to work with them, hopefully, in therapy and so forth. I mean, years ago, when we had a plentiful amount of vocations, you could not be ordained, or you'd be thrown out of the seminary if you couldn't master Latin. Latin. I think when you have a larger number of candidates, there's a different way of looking at things.
And of course, now with the scandal, it's going to be worrisome, I guess, about pulling in more candidates.
Correct.
But historically, Father Radicek, hasn't the church employed a strategy of protecting the priest over the victim?
I think everybody is on a learning curve. I think all of the leadership of the church, I think therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, I think in recent years we've all been on a learning curve. There have been a number of bishops who only put priests back in parishes at the therapist. The therapist said, this person is ready to go back into parish ministry. And so the bishop acted upon recommendations from a therapist. And again, I think we're all learning that maybe pedophilia is not, in a sense, curable, that person needs to be isolated, contained, quarantined away from children and in specific surroundings. So again, I think we are all learning, and I wouldn't put the blame in just one place.
Okay. What about you, Rosemary? Do you think that the idea of pedophiles being incurable, that's sort of emerging now, or has emerged? I'm not so sure it's now. I think that there's been a feeling about this among professionals for a number of years, that you cannot cure them, and there's a lot of recidivism.
But I think 25 years ago there was a body of thought that they could be cured, and now the emerging thought is that they can't be cured. It's treatable but not curable. And so that, I think, in some cases, the bishops were given bad advice, just not knowing the therapists, given what they knew at the time, made this recommendation, and they went with the recommendation.
Okay, so let's.
They made a good faith effort, perhaps, to put the person in treatment, and then to rely on the recommendations of professionals in the mental health profession.
I would agree with that, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, so here we are now. The scandal was in the making for many years.
Mm-hmm.
You go along with that. Why didn't the church adopt a zero-tolerance policy long ago for pedophile priests?
Again, that's a good question, and again, I think because all of us are on a learning curve in regards to these issues. Personally, I think right now a zero tolerance for any sexual abuse of a minor by a priest or by any professional, by anybody, is a good policy to adopt. And again, as a society, as we learn more about ourselves and about seeing pedophilia as a mental illness, I think we're going to be moving, and we are moving in that direction.
So why isn't there a zero tolerance policy now?
I'm hopeful that will come out of the bishops' meeting in June, that they will come out with a zero tolerance policy for the good of the church, for the good of victims, and really for the good of the perpetrators as well.
Is there any kind of pressure that the local parishes or local laity can put on this conference of bishops that you know of? I mean, is there any input you can give as a member of the involved lay public?
Well, certainly I understand from talking with people in the chancery that the local diocesan offices have been besieged with phone calls and emails and letters from people concerned about this issue and very troubled by it.
And where does that go? I mean, you know, it's one thing to get emails, and what happens to those? Do they become part of the conversation?
I'm not really sure. I don't really know where, for example, Bishop Rahm and Bishop Chavez, what their personal recommendations are going to be at the June meeting.
Is there any way of finding that out?
I guess we could ask them. My assumption would be, of course, that they would read the emails and would read the letters, and all of that will be part of their thinking as they go for deliberations in Dallas, definitely. I mean, it is for the good of this diocese and all dioceses that the bishop, of course, would take seriously the things that he is hearing from the laity. So.
Are there any repercussions if, let's say, a bishop doesn't seem to be responsive to what it is that parishioners are saying? Do you sense that there will be any repercussions, Father?
I think, yes, I think there will be. Again, as Rosemary stated earlier, I think we're in a time where there's a desire for more lay involvement, and I think there will be a willingness from lay people to get involved for the good of the church, because we are all the church together, that there will be a greater lay involvement in many circles of the church.
Is that how you feel that the church can reestablish its integrity and regain the confidence of Catholics?
Yes, I think that will be an essential part of the reform.
And that's it? I mean, that's the essential part? What other
Well,
parts?
there obviously are other parts, tolerance policy and uniform procedures throughout certainly the United States on how these cases should be treated, and there should be mandatory reporting to law enforcement, for example. And I think that certainly seminary formation has to be looked at, and I think it has greatly improved in the last 10 or 15 years. I have friends who were ordained, say, 20, 30 years ago, and they got like one talk on human sexuality, and it was all hush-hush, and then it wasn't really discussed much throughout the formation process, and really throughout our whole lives. It's an issue we all deal with, whether we're celibate or married or gay or straight or whatever we are. The issue of human sexuality is part of being human.
Can we expect, I mean, picking up on what you said, Rosemary, can we expect that we are going to have a frank discussion of sexual morality and celibacy or homosexuality to come out of this situation? Do you think that's going to change? Let's start with you, Father.
I would hope that it would, and I think it would because of the crisis, in a sense, the crisis situation that we're in, that it would be very opportune for the church at large to have a very good discussion about human sexuality.
Do you think it's going to happen?
I'm hopeful that I think it will, yes. Yeah.
Well, you've been involved in some aspects of this. You were telling me earlier before the show about a meeting that you went to.
Involved in various meetings within the parish as well, in terms of my discussions with people, that we are very hopeful that this kind of discussion will take place. I know I'm doing it at a local level within my parish. I mean, I think that's where I have some influence and some control, if you will, and so I'm doing a lot to have open and frank discussions within our parish community about this situation.
What kinds of discussions? What do they sound like?
In terms of talking about the priests being cut from the same cloth, giving a background to the situations that we have 195 dioceses, that there have been many things that have been placed to deal with the situation over the years, that many dioceses have handled the situation very well, but there's been a few glaring mistakes.
Do you feel, Rosemary, that there are open discussions going on in San Diego churches? Are you engaging in any of those discussions?
Not overtly. I'm not going to meetings or anything like that, but I am receiving and sending lots of emails, articles that I'm reading in the New York Times or in America or National Catholic Reporter, U.S. Catholic, other publications, to share with my friends, most of whom are Roman Catholic, and who are active in ministry in the church.
And are they sharing feelings with
absolutely.
you? What kinds of things are they saying? What is it
well,
that
it's
they're
very
talking about?
It's very distressing, the whole situation is, and certainly it presents a loss of credibility to the institutional church, and as someone who's been very involved in social justice issues, I think it's very important. The church has a lot of credibility in standing with the poor and the marginalized, advocating for justice and peace and that kind of thing, and I think some of those efforts may be damaged. I also think there is a financial bottom line. I think a lot of people may vote with their wallets and withhold contributions to the church as a result of this until they are satisfied that some of the systemic change that is necessary is implemented.
Have you seen that? Have you seen the offering basket becoming less full?
Again, not in our parish. Again, I think because of the good discussions that we're having, I'm providing our parishioners with information through my pastor's column. Our attendance at Mass is remaining steady. Our collections are remaining steady. And again, I think everybody, we're people of faith. We see some problems, and we're willing to work on them. Again, I think the need is for less secrecy and more openness about the life of the priest, the priesthood, and more information about how did these problems occur and what are we going to do to resolve them.
But that sort of detracts from the mystical nature of the priesthood, doesn't it? I mean, you are held in sort of awe by many people, and if you make it less secret and more open, don't you just become a human being like the rest of us?
I I am, and I kind of like that. And I think if you want to talk about the mystical nature, I'd rather talk about the mystical nature of the church. All of us from baptism have taken on this mission and ministry of Jesus, and it belongs to all of us, and we have different roles and functions and ministries within that body of Christ.
And you said you are successfully able to separate your feelings about the church from your feelings about the faith.
Yes.
How do you do that? I mean, you know,
Well, I see the church as a teacher and a guide, as my place of community, where I gather and celebrate and grieve and am joyful with the people of God. And certainly the institution, the hierarchy, and all that is a part of it. But I don't put all my faith in that, because as Father said, they're human and vulnerable too. You know, Henri Nouwen, one of his many wonderful books on spirituality is called The Wounded Healer. And our priests are wounded healers also.
Yeah, certainly we know the story of Father Paul Shanley, retired priest, who was arrested last week in San Diego. And he was working at that time with the San Diego Police Department's retired volunteer force. Sordid cases, and you have to call that kind of a sordid case, such as Shanley's, have some Catholics expressing doubt about the church. I mean, they see this happen, they read about it, they see the priest being dragged off to Boston to have to face what's going to be an ugly trial, I'm sure. How do you handle this? Do your parishioners talk to you about that?
Yes, yeah.
And what do you say to them?
Again, the doubt, I think, comes not with the church. The doubt comes with certain situations in terms of why were these situations not handled properly? Why was there the secrecy? So they want to get at the truth of that particular situation, the leadership, people who are making decisions. But I don't think there's a doubt in terms of faith about the church.
Now, you did talk about that you are available for open and respectful, you use that word, discussion. What does that mean? What does it mean? How far can you go, and what is respectful?
I find that I'm willing to sit down with people, which I've been doing in the parish, in answering any questions that they have about priests, about these situations, and I share with them my perspective, and I'm to say that this is how I feel about this. What do you think? And I think we come to truth together as we enter into that discussion and that dialogue.
All right, so if you suspected a priest of sexual abuse, how would you handle it? You pursue the issue?
Today I would go to the bishop and have a discussion with him, and then I'm sure we would report it.
Okay, and if it wasn't reported?
I'm sure it would be reported.
Okay, all right. Rosemary, are you finding that these open discussions that you mentioned before and that the Father Radicek referred to, that they are beneficial to those people that you know within the lay public surrounding the Catholic Church? I mean, is it getting to them? Are they getting it?
Oh, definitely. I think it's very helpful to have discussions about this issue in the parish community. It's essential for healing, for all of us contributing to solutions, for creating a better, stronger church that more closely mirrors the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. So it's essential.
And if all of this hadn't happened, if we didn't have all of this publicity and this scandal and the revelations, what would have happened in terms of the growth of the church?
Well, I don't think it could have been kept under the carpet forever. I mean, these allegations, there's been allegations since the 80s, but never so many so fast. And I think it's to be expected once these allegations and abuses have surfaced that victims who very often kind of stuff their feelings and hide these events and don't talk about it to anyone for years and years. And then in therapy or just maybe reading a newspaper article, they go, they say to themselves, something happened to me when I was 11. When I was in this parish and this priest did something to me. And it may trigger them to take some action. And it's typical that it is repressed. And the other part of it, however, unfortunately, is that it also, in this atmosphere, can lead to false accusations against priests. So someone who had a negative experience with a priest, maybe the priest decided not to officiate at their wedding or not to baptize their child or whatever, and then or it may have been someone who made some overtures to a priest that were rebuffed.
And finally, Father Rat, you want to add that this is going to be your final remark.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's important to point out that all of these allegations that have come forward are at least 10 years old or older, which says that the church has done a lot of good to correct the situations of the past, that there are no allegations in recent years. These are all old allegations. I think it's very good, though, in the long run. It's going to be very good for the church and I think society at large that this has come forward and that we're going to be able to deal with it not only in the church but in society at large.
Well, I thank Rosemary Johnson and Father Michael Radicek for being with me, and I hope you'll join me next week for another These Days special edition. I'm Gloria Penner.
Next time on Health Week, bloodless surgery. I'm Cheryl Atkinson. See how new techniques are helping surgeons perform operations without transfusions on Health Week. Next time on Health Week, diet addicts. I'm Cheryl Atkinson. See what happens when the quest for the perfect diet turns unhealthy. Next time on Health Week.
Del director de Selena y el Norte, viene una nueva serie de PBS que se trata de la vida cuando es buena y cuando no es tan buena.
I cannot let you destroy this family.
Se trata de lo que más importa.
I'm so proud of you.
I'm so glad you're here.
Ha llegado la hora de American Family.
From the director of Selena and El Norte comes a new PBS series about life when it's good.
We won!
And not so good.
I cannot let you destroy this family.
It's about what matters most.
I'm so proud of you.
I'm so glad you're here.
It's about time for American Family.
Today on Uncommon Knowledge, just how liberal is Hollywood? The politics of Tinseltown with Rob Long and Harry Shearer.
Funding for this program is provided by the John M. Olin Foundation and the Star Foundation.
Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. Our show today, the politics of Hollywood. We've all seen it again and again. The charity fundraising events, the campaign appearances, the celebrity